Like only in the most extreme conditions. There is a reason why federal troops, particularly after the Civil War, under posse comitatus, are not used domestically. It's because you start playing with very, very dangerous forces when you politicize the U.S. military. So I would say no, except under the absolute most extreme conditions.
An open question, Elliott Ackerman. Paul and I were sort of baffled by the non-news this morning, the weight of this war of Israel and Iran. What are you focusing on this morning?
I'm looking closely at the deployment of U.S. assets to the regions because that's going to telegraph what options President Trump has. And I'm also looking very, very closely at the rhetoric coming both from President Trump and Khamenei. And I think we're going to sort of understand what direction this conflict turns to in the coming days.
Elliott, what do you think could be the options available to President Trump right here?
Well, listen, I think the contingency has everybody's focus is whether or not the U.S. would augment Israeli strike capabilities by launching an attack on some of the more difficult nuclear targets inside of Iran, particularly Fordow, that one nuclear facility buried deep underground that the Israelis can't quite get to. That seems to be the most pressing capability that the Israelis would want for the United States. But there are also secondary capabilities, like our ability to augment their aerial refueling capacity. And then I would say one other thing, I'm watching too is force protection measures being taken by U.S. troops in the regions. How are they reposturing in the event that there would be an Iranian strike against those targets?
Out of our White House staff, Kelly Gardner, Josh Wingrove, Stephanie Lay, Arsalan Shala, off of the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei comments here, and in translation, the headline is, Iran's leader shows defiance with U.S. weighing war intervention. Elliott, my rule as an amateur is get out the map. When Elliott Ackerman gets out the map of the distance from the Mediterranean east all the way across to Persia, how do you perceive that map?
I think the one thing that's the most obvious, right, is that Iran and Israel are fighting a war, but they have no contiguous borders between the two nations. And there are a whole host of Arab countries in between the two. So I think we need to be also considering what impact this conflict has on partners in the regions. What message are Arab nations projecting sort of publicly, but, also what are the conversations privately? So there is a whole slew of countries that are enmeshed in this conflict between Israel and Iran right now, and the U.S. is just one of them.
Elliott, what do you believe a reasonable strategy or end strategy for Israel might be? Would it be simply, erasing their nuclear capabilities? Would it be dealing a serious blow to the military? Or even, I guess, in the ultimate, some type of regime change? What do you think their strategy is at this point?
I think it's important to keep in mind that the Israelis have already achieved a number of their strategic objectives, and so much as the Iranian nuclear capability has been significantly degraded in just the last week alone. So Iran, no longer sits on the cusp of being able to build dozens of nuclear weapons. And then the question becomes what is the end state? Is the end state some type of new nuclear regime inside of Iran with new rounds of weapons inspections? Is it the collapse of the Iranian state? And if it were the collapse of the Iranian state, what would fill that vacuum? There's just so many variables right now on the table in this conflict. And you have President Trump saying, we demand unconditional surrender. But that in and of itself seems vague. What does unconditional surrender mean to the Ayatollahs?